have to say any more than that, but I will. The right to own private property that cannot be arbitrarily confiscated by the government is the source of our freedom. Our founders, especially Thomas Jefferson, understood that a person's property consisted not only of his land and his home, but also the work of his hands, the inventions of his brain, and ultimately his life itself. Protection for private property rights is enshrined in our Constitution and finds its primary source in the Ten Commandments. Prohibitions against envy, theft, bearing false witness, and murder deal directly with protection of this natural law right. From the dawn of civilization, groups of men have sought to rule over others. The result is always the same: a struggle to prevent tyrants from eliminating individual freedom. Right now, the front line in this battle is the United Nations Agenda 21. Agenda 21, with its concept of sustainable development, formally began at the UN's Conference of Rio in 1992. To save Mother Earth from a promised environmental catastrophe, sustainable development severely restricts the use of all Earth's resources by human beings in a system of biodiversity in which all living things and non-living components of our planet's ecosystem are of equal value. It is a goal that is meant to sound noble and impossible to oppose. But in spite of the flowery language and lofty promises of a better tomorrow, it is a sadistic hoax. The true intention of the proponents of Agenda 21 is to create a socialist, redistributive, one-world government run by self-appointed elitists, shielded by the banner of the United Nations. Suppose in today's world you wanted to be the supreme ruler of mankind, the Lord of Earth. What aspects of human society would you want to control? What aspects would you need to control? Well, you'd need to control private property. How about energy, food and water, education of our youth, individual privacy, healthcare, which Claire Gray has so eloquently described, personal mobility, and the use of deadly force? The UN's Agenda 21 seeks total control on a global scale over all of these 8 items. The direct attack on private property rights was the very first UN initiative after the Conference of Rio in 1992. In September of 1994, proponents of Agenda 21 attempted to get the UN Biodiversity Treaty ratified by the US Senate. This treaty proclaimed that human life is of no greater value than animal life or plant life. Further, it set aside over 50% of the US mainland for human-free zones and buffer zones with limited human activity, leaving only tiny isolated islands of land, those pale green areas on this map, called human occupation zones. Fortunately, Kay Bailey Hutchinson prevented the ratification of that treaty by showing this Wildlands Project map on the Senate floor in 1994. Unfortunately, most of this treaty's provisions are being enacted behind our backs by presidential, executive orders, and regulations at the state and local level. Using the environmental acts and regulations such as the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, the federal government already owns over 40% of the land in the US, especially out west. So, this is how it works. First, a species is designated endangered and its habitat identified, and that habitat is surrounded by a buffer zone. Then, privately owned land in and around that habitat is confiscated and its use by humans restricted to allow the animals and plants to thrive. Property owners are forced off their land by onerous usage regulations, excessive taxation, arbitrary zoning laws, eminent domain abuse, and outright condemnation. The Central Valley region of California is one of the most fertile and productive farm regions in the U.S. Pumps bringing essential irrigation for crops in the region have been shut off by a court order to protect a small minnow, the Delta smelt. Oil production in western Texas is now threatened by attempts to declare the sand dune lizard an endangered species. Environmental observers visited what they considered to be probable habitats for the lizard. They watched for 1 hour in each location. They saw no lizards and therefore decided the species was in fact endangered. So, a 2-inch long fish could turn the Central Valley into a dust bowl, and a 3-inch long lizard could halt oil production in West Texas, all thanks to the Endangered Species Act. Make no mistake, the goal is to eliminate all private property rights using eminent domain abuse, forced annexation, building permits with arbitrary and meaningless land use restrictions, and unconstitutional search and seizure to enforce unenforceable laws. One of the most egregious examples of this is occurring in Antelope Valley, California, where Los Angeles County is requiring current landowners, many of whom have lived there for decades, to bring their dwellings up to current building codes or face eviction and loss of their property. Reed Noss, the co-author of the Wildlands Project, clearly states its goals. The collective needs of non-human species must take precedence over the needs and desires of humans. That really says it all, doesn't it? On the very first Earth Day in 1978, the scientific elite warned us that global cooling and a new ice age was upon us. When the Earth's climate did not cooperate, their new crisis was global warming. Al, I ain't going to use your light bulbs. Initially, their data clearly blamed carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels. Later, it was revealed that the results were deliberately falsified to prove the politically correct agenda. Energy is essential for commerce and the maintenance of our human lifestyle. All life and energy processes on Earth are based on the carbon molecule. Animals take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. Plants take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. And all living organisms use carbon-based molecules in food for energy production. Regulations disregarding that simple fact, such as designating carbon dioxide a poison, are primarily designed to decrease energy available for transportation and industrial growth, and ultimately to restrict human activity. Rising energy costs with eventual shortages and rationing of fuel will adversely affect every aspect of human life. Food, mobility, healthcare, recreation, and individual freedom. And those are all the goals of Agenda 21.